hot. Thought I should check that beforehand. So before we get started, I like to know who's in the crowd. How many in here are working in Angular? Okay. How about React? Wow. So I've spoken at so many conferences, and I have never seen React outnumber Angular like that. That was probably 60 or 70% of the room. How about anybody in Ember? Not a one. That's pretty common. It's very common. Anybody in Backbone? Hey, you Backbone people stick together. Way to go. Yes. That doesn't surprise me either. Okay. Okay, so before we get started, I'd love to know this. You can just call it out. What do you feel like is the biggest pain point for you as a JavaScript developer today? Keeping up with frameworks. Yes. That is my life. That's why I'm like, I'm sorry, honey, I will come to bed late tonight. Somebody invented something again, so I hope it's good. What else?
Silent failure.
Silent failure, yes, yes. Oh, so that reminds me of back when I was doing jQuery, and it was, okay, yes, some DOM selector didn't work out. Great, let me begin figuring this out. Yeah, failing slowly is really frustrating. Let me check. Let's see. We're right at 11. So when do we formally get started? Do I get some kind of a signal, or are we already rolling? I'm not sure. Oh, we're rolling. Hi, everybody. Wonderful. Good morning. So I am Corey House, and this is the JavaScript Starter Kit Manifesto. I am a software architect at Cox Automotive in Kansas City. Actually work for a small company called Vin Solutions that is owned by AutoTrader, which is owned by Cox Automotive. It's America. We keep acquiring and acquiring. I'm also an author at Pluralsight, have a number of courses out there on clean code, on software architecture, on React. My latest course is about building JavaScript development environments. I'm an independent consultant, and also I speak all over the world at conferences and user groups like this, consulting at businesses as well. So if you're interested, reach out to me. But enough about me. Let's talk about your problems. This is life for us as JavaScript developers. It is about fatigue. I feel fatigued. I imagine that you often do too. And I've been thinking a lot about this problem. That's really precisely what this talk is about and what I want to fix. Because when it comes down to it, I think, what is the solution to fatigue? Well, one obvious solution is just to ignore it. If you're feeling overwhelmed by all the innovation, just pretend it's not there. Just keep writing vanilla JavaScript. See how that works out for you. Probably not well. You'll be reinventing the wheel in so many ways. So I feel like this isn't a practical solution, and I think if you're in this room, you're not interested in this solution anyway. So option number 2 is this. Nobody in this room has really chosen this solution. That's why I asked at the beginning. I said, so who here is working in Ember? And not a single, oh wait, we got an Ember developer in the back. Hello, Ember developer. This talk may not be very useful for you because if you are working in Ember, it has so many opinions on everything. A lot of the things I'm talking about are baked in, and if you don't like them, tough luck. Go elsewhere. That's their opinion. So for most people in this room, you're in this third spot here where I believe that you need to get together with your team and create a starter kit. That is what I believe is the solution for the vast majority of JavaScript developers out there. It's one that we've done, so we're going to dive into that idea. Now, before we started recording here, we were talking about the first world problems of being a JavaScript developer and all of the pain of, oh, I just can't keep up with all these awesome free libraries. Yeah, life is very hard for me. People keep giving me all this free stuff and I can't keep up. This reminds me a lot of, here's a pro tip for you. If you were at a family reunion, do not complain about how your phone keeps ringing with recruiters wanting to offer you these awesome jobs. Your family will hate you. I remember mentioning this just off the cuff at something and people really looked at me like I had two heads. Like, that happens? People call you and ask you to interview? Yes, in software development it is fairly common. So us complaining about fatigue in JavaScript is really us complaining about all the awesomeness that we could potentially be using to make our lives better. And this is really our key pain point, is too many decisions. How many? Well, I'm going to just stand in silence to emphasize this is our problem today. This is going to keep going for a while, so maybe I won't stand in silence. But what you're going to see here, these are 40 decisions. 40 decisions that if you are doing a file new project to work in JavaScript, you have to decide all of this. This is overwhelming. And by the way, this is also why so many people working in JavaScript today aren't doing much of what you see up here. How many in here are doing automated testing consistently in JavaScript? Less than half the room. Less than half the room. And we are at a dedicated JavaScript conference. So I would expect we are a lot of the alphas in JavaScript, and even us, less than half are doing so. I believe it's because we are overwhelmed with the number of decisions that we have to make, even in that little narrow space. So my question is this: if you are feeling overwhelmed, what is the solution to that overwhelm? And my argument is that your team needs a JavaScript starter kit. This is the way that I think about it. While I am fatigued, I'm going to continue enhancing my team's JavaScript starter kit. And that's precisely what we've done. Is started off, my team works in React. And in React, since it's just a library, it lacks opinions on all sorts of things: bundling and minification and linting and automated builds and transpiling, and the list goes on and on. So one very, very valuable thing you can do is at one time get together and make those decisions so that it's not overwhelming for people getting started later. So let's talk for a second. Why is this idea of a JavaScript starter kit so critical? Well, first, it codifies a bunch of decisions that you're going to have to make every time you're starting a new project. It codifies the decisions that you've made, the best practices that you want to follow on your team, any of the lessons that you've learned along the way. It also encourages consistency. It encourages every new project that you create should look and feel a lot like the previous one that you made. This helps you avoid forgetting all sorts of important details. See that slide that had 40+ decisions on it? I bet you couldn't have listed all of those if you and I were talking, despite the fact that at one point or the other, you were having to make all of those. It's easy for that stuff to hit the floor. So doing so, having this starter kit, helps increase the quality of your project, because it makes doing the right thing the easy thing. That's really important. If you can make the right thing the easy thing, then it's a lot more likely to happen. Finally, it avoids repeating work. Having to set up all of a boilerplate every time we do something new is just work that doesn't add a lot of value. So let's quickly get into truly building the app. So this is my take. Today's list of best practices is just too long for any one of us to hold in our head. It is not practical. So what we need is a starter kit that does that work for you. Now, so far, I've been saying the word starter kit, but I should clarify, there's all sorts of synonyms for this. You'll hear people say JavaScript development environment, boilerplate, seed, starter project, scaffold, generator, etc. So when you are Googling around looking for existing ideas, these are the sorts of terms that you can put into Google and say, oh, I'm an Angular developer, Angular boilerplate, Angular starter project, Angular scaffold, and you can look at all sorts of examples of how other people have solved it as inspiration for your team's solution. So I should clarify here, who is this talk for and who isn't it for? Well, backing up for a second, it seems pretty much JavaScript is swallowing the world, and Jeff Atwood quite a while back said that any app that could be written in JavaScript will be written in JavaScript, and that sounded pretty silly at the time, but now we're living in an era where NPM, which is effectively JavaScript's package manager, is the world's largest package manager. Over 300,000 packages out there. It's crazy. And I believe that this conversation about having a starter kit applies to everybody, whether you're working for the web, whether you're writing JavaScript on the server, whether you're doing mobile and NativeScript, React Native, PhoneGap, or if you're writing desktop apps in something like Electron. All of these require a lot of the same decisions. I still have to decide whether I want to bundle and transpile, how I want to do automated deployments, how I want to lint my code, and that list goes on and on. So having a starter kit for all these places is useful. So this talk is effectively, I think, for any JavaScript developer. So who isn't it for? Well, it's probably not for the guy in the back that's doing Ember. Hi, guy in the back, he's laughing. He's like, why did I come here? I could have went to Elijah Manner's talk. It looked awesome. By the way, thank you all for coming, because that's where I'd like to be. His talk looks awesome. So Ember is great because Ember has all these opinions baked in. In Ember, you don't have to decide how to do testing. You don't have to decide how to do a CLI. You don't have to decide where to put your files or what to name them. All of that is just baked in because you chose Ember. Now, the thing is, a lot of people don't like Ember's opinions, and you don't really have a choice in the matter. You have to take them, and I think that's precisely why in this room of people, only one person has chosen Ember, because people look at it and go, yeah, it just doesn't quite fit me. And this is precisely why a starter kit is so powerful, because you and your team, given your own opinions, your own experiences, can build a starter kit that works best for you. And this concept of starter kit is going to apply more to you as you sit on the left-hand side of this screen. For instance, if you're working in React and Node, there's not a whole lot of opinion there. It's, hey, here's some tooling, get started, go pull other things off the shelf and get it done. If you're working in Ember, on the other hand, Ember's like a religion. You got to accept it all or you're not going to fit in. So this is a gamut of opinion. I also find it very interesting that Angular has become very, very popular as a framework that is sitting somewhere in the middle here. It's not super, super opinionated, but it does have more opinion with React than React does, for instance, which makes it, for some people, feel more approachable. Of course, another decision you have to make is whether to go pull down someone else's boilerplate or whether to build your own. Of course, if you use someone else's boilerplate, you can save time. You know that it's proven because other people have put it to use, and it's often very full-featured. But if you build your own, this is huge. You have freedom. You have freedom to make it yours, to build it in a way that fits your team best, to put only the features in that you care about. It makes it the perfect fit for your team. This helps avoid all the unnecessary complexity that's often in existing solutions that you see elsewhere. And this means that this is rather important. You actually understand it. If you go pull down my boilerplate, which is React Slingshot, and it's going to take you a while to look at it all because that is me encapsulating about a year's worth of work. So it's a lot of code to take in. You wouldn't expect to immediately understand it, but if you build your own from scratch using other people's as inspiration, your team really does know it. And that makes this last point key. It makes it easy to change. So a few years ago, well, I shouldn't say a few years ago, but about a year ago, I read a book called The Checklist Manifesto. And this really hit me hard as a developer, because as developers, we could really use checklists. And I think as developers, we tend to move away from them. But imagine this. Imagine I'm a doctor. I have a patient sitting on the bed. I have to run a line into their body. I'm going to have to make an incision. When I'm going to make that incision, it is really key that I go through a list of steps to make sure that they don't get an infection. I have to wash my hands thoroughly, put on a cap. I have to put a sterile dressing over a part of their body. There is 5 different key things that I need to do. If I skip just one of those steps, then someone is very likely to get an infection. Now here's what's interesting. If I go ask a doctor what those 5 steps are, that doctor can immediately rattle off that list. It's not a problem. But in studies where doctors have been monitored in actual hospitals, what they've found is a portion of the time they miss it. They miss one of those steps. And it's so easy to understand. The same thing happens to us as developers. We know that we should do automated testing. We know that linting is useful. We know that minification is important. But a lot of us don't because it's just a step that gets skipped. We get busy and we get focused on completing the task. And there's some very interesting takeaways from this, that we think we can remember all the steps, but we just can't. It is not practical. So these doctors that were followed, they were told that they needed to implement a checklist, which a lot of doctors are averse to because they say, hey, I'm a professional. I shouldn't need a checklist. We as developers feel the same way. But what they found was this. Once they had a checklist that they were following, line infection rates fall from 11% to 0. 0. And this is really important because when somebody gets an infection in the ICU, they are very, very likely to have other serious complications and often die. This is what the checklist prevented over a year period. 43 infections, 8 deaths, over $2 million in costs by having a checklist. What if we as software developers had a checklist that was helping make sure that we did the right things? That's precisely what we need as JavaScript developers. So those 40 items up there on that slide, You can't remember them. It's too much. And don't let it make you feel like you're not professional, because remember, we just saw, doctors know what to do, but it's easy to overlook a step. Same story with developers. Because a starter kit is an automated, living, and interactive checklist. That's what makes it so powerful. Okay, so let's shift gears for a second. I want to talk about what belongs in your starter kit. There's a long list of things that I think belong there. We should think about package management, bundling, minification, source maps, transpiling, dynamic HTML generation, centralized HTTP requests, a mock API framework so that you can code without the actual API being created yet, component libraries, of course, so that you can actually build your app without just plain using vanilla JS, a development web server so that you don't have to spin something up manually, linting, automated testing, continuous integration, an automated build process. Again, this shouldn't be something done manually. And then an automated deployment so that it's repeatable. Finally, I believe that there should be a working example app there as part of your application. That's a heck of a list. So when we look at that list right there, how many of you in this room are honestly doing all those things today as a JavaScript developer? Ember guy. Thank you. It's like we coordinated this. That's awesome. So and this is the thing, there's no good reason that an Angular developer, a React developer, a Backbone developer, they could be doing all of this. And I will tell you, as a React developer, my team is doing all of this. But the reason that we're doing all of this is because we're using a starter kit that just bakes it all in. And by having that baked in, every time we start a new project, we don't have to pay for any of this. It's free, and that is really powerful. So I want to go through a lightning round here. For those of you that are taking notes, get your pencils ready, because what I'm going to share is a lot of opinions very, very quickly. Of course, this talk is really an encapsulation of a 5-hour course that I just published on Pluralsight, but I'm trying to give you the really key ideas. And I'm going to warn you, I'm going to make strong opinions here, and I don't have time to justify them. But afterwards, I would love to talk to everybody, and I'd love to have lunch with some of you so that you can tell me how much you hate me for my opinions. It'll be fun. Yeah, we can be friends. Okay, so this is really, really important. As JavaScript developers, we are burdened by this paradox of choice. I really love this book. So the book Paradox of Choice talks about the problem of when we are presented with so many options, what we tend to do is just say, I'm paralyzed. I'm paralyzed by the options, so I'm not going to move at all. Here's an example of this. There was a study. They showed, okay, you go into a grocery store. The grocery store clerk is offering you grape jelly and strawberry jelly. Which one would you like to sample? And you walk up, well, this is an easy decision. I like grape jelly, I'll try this. Lots of people came up and tried that. Later, they had 65 jellies sitting there on the table. And how do you choose when there's that many? People look up and they go, I'm overwhelmed, I'm just not even going to bother. I can't decide amongst all this. And that's precisely what we're running into today in JavaScript, with people trying to decide, well, should I use Jasmine or Mocha or Jest or QUnit? Oh, it's overwhelming. So I'm going to share opinions, and I believe this. Derek Sivers said that strong opinions are very useful to others because those who are undecided or ambivalent can just adopt your stance. But those who disagree can solidify their stance by arguing against yours. Isn't that fun? So that's what I'm going to do, is help you out. Here's my 2 cents. Time for the lightning round. Let's get rolling. Step number 1, you need to choose an editor. And I would argue this. These are the 4 best options to choose. If you are trying to do JavaScript development today in Visual Studio or in NetBeans, in some kind of a large IDE, I believe that's the wrong decision. My favorite editor is WebStorm. I would highly recommend it. It is not free, but I believe in buying the best tools for the job. If you don't want to pay for WebStorm, VS Code is a really nice second place. I've been spending a lot of time there. Regardless, set up editor config. This will enforce consistency on your team. Tabs versus spaces, tab spacing size, a lot of other little settings, and then everybody, regardless of editor, will have these enforced on their team. You need to choose a package manager. This is an easy decision. Which package manager should you use? NPM, there we go. We have agreed as a team. Other options out there, but JSPM is interesting, but honestly, I would just suggest using NPM. You need to pick a development web server. Well, I think HTTP server is pretty cool because A turtle strapped to a rocket? How awesome is that? That is a great logo. But seriously, I would recommend really looking into Browser Sync. It is super impressive. If you've never seen this before, take a tablet, take a bunch of different phones, glue them to the wall, hook them all up to your machine, and as you browse on your machine using Browser Sync, all of those other devices will be in sync, and you'll see as you click, as you scroll, it's all there. It's completely free. Very, very cool. You need a way to quickly share your work in progress. Now on my team, what we like to use is Local Tunnel. What Local Tunnel does is I just say Local Tunnel port 3000, and then immediately it punches a hole in the firewall, lets people go directly to my dev machine so they can see my work in progress. I don't have to push it out to a public server. They are seeing my live development right there. Very, very easy to get going. You need to choose an automation approach. I, again, think this is an easy decision. I used to be a big fan of Grunt, and then I was out there evangelizing Gulp like crazy. Then I finally realized, you know what, NPM is simpler. I don't see any reason to reach for Grunt or Gulp anymore. I have a long blog post on this. If you just Google for NPM versus Gulp, or why I left Gulp for NPM, the fact is, what NPM does is gets rid of the plugin abstraction that exists with Gulp and Grunt. And once you get rid of that abstraction, which from my experience just wasn't buying me anything, it gets easier to debug, easier to read the docs, and you don't have to wait for these plugins to show up. Another decision here, you need to pick a module format. Or I'm sorry, you need to pick a transpiler. I'm a big fan of Babel, so that is what we use. TypeScript is very interesting. If you can get your team to use Elm though, huge, huge win. Here's the most amazing thing about Elm. If you haven't heard it, in Elm it is not possible to get a runtime error. Blew my mind. It is amazing, and it is really, really helpful with its compile time error messaging. Now, nonetheless, I choose Babel because Babel lets me use everything in the JavaScript ecosystem. If I choose TypeScript, there are some things that I truly can't use. ESLint is one example. ESLint will soon add TypeScript support, but I don't believe it's quite here yet. When React first came out, I couldn't use it with TypeScript because the syntax is conflicted. So that's why I typically prefer to just use Babel. You need to choose a module format. I think these days this is a pretty easy decision. Use ES6 modules. If you're in Node, then of course go ahead and use your CommonJS for now. But ES6 modules are the future, so if you don't know these others, don't bother learning them. They are now the past. You need to pick a bundler. I also think that this is a very easy decision. If you are building a web application, use Webpack. It's awesome, and it is getting much, much better every day. The docs are finally not awful. For Webpack 2, the docs are really very, very good, and they're very soon to be production grade. Not quite there yet. My one exception is if you were writing a library instead of a web application, Rollup is quite slick right now. Now, I think soon Webpack 2 may be a really good choice for libraries as well, but for now, Rollup's tree shaking abilities are quite slick. You need to pick a linter. Again, very, very easy decision. Just use ESLint. I cannot think of a single reason to reach for JSHint or JSLint. If anybody has one, come see me afterward. And that wasn't an offer to fight or anything. I just wanted to have a conversation. I should clarify. Okay, this one's huge. If you're going to do automated testing, this is why people don't do automated testing. That's why less than half of this room at November is doing automated testing, because you look at this list and go, well, I don't know, I got to choose a framework and an assertion library, what helpers, where should I put my tests, what should I name them? That's overwhelming. But I like to think of it like this. It's like choosing a gym. Have you ever stood by the guy that goes, yeah, I need to choose a gym. I was shopping over here. I was trying to decide what shoes I should wear, and I don't have the right clothes, and then should I do aerobics or weights? No, 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 no. Just go to the gym. Do something at the gym for a half hour, and you will be better off than sitting and vacillating on the decisions. So when we talk about automated testing, the important part is showing up. That's key. So the right answer when you're trying to choose a JavaScript framework is any of these. Just pick one. You'll be just fine. Some are a little bit better than others. I have my preferences. I typically use Mocha these days, although Jest has really become quite impressive as well. But the wrong answer is to be this guy. I'll just keep hoping and praying. Maybe it'll work out. And the reason that guy does that is he's overwhelmed with all the options. So as a team, just pick it and go. You need a continuous integration server. So many out here. Now my take is if you're hosting on GitHub, Travis is the easiest way to get going. So just use Travis. If there's some reason that you need Windows support, use AppVeyor. We're actually using AppVeyor and Travis because my team, half of us are on Macs, half of us are on PCs, so we need to know that our build works on both systems. So we just have 2 CI servers. Hey, they're free. No big downside. You need to choose how to make HTTP calls. All sorts of interesting ways out there to do it. You probably shouldn't be reaching for plain old XML HTTP requests anymore. Look at some of these over on the right. I'm a big fan of Axios. I hope I'm saying that right. Nobody's correcting me. We're going to go with it. Yeah. Super agents also are really useful. Fetch is the new standard, which is worth considering, but there are some limitations to it. It's not as full-featured as using something like Super Agent or Axios. You need to choose an HTTP mocking approach. I like to use JSON Server. I just posted a blog post a few days ago. If you go out on Medium, look for Corey House on Medium, you'll find the blog post on it. And there's an example GitHub repository. I am super excited about this because I will tell you this. We are right now building an application that's huge. This is the very core of our system. And the API team is not going to have time to even get started on it for a couple months, but we are nearly done with the user interface. And when you use the interface, it looks real because we are generating realistic data. We say generate a realistic username, realistic password, realistic looking vehicles, realistic even pictures. I can say, hey, here's a mock API that comes out and generates a URL to some CDN that gives me an image of a certain size so that I can have placeholders. When I add and delete, it is writing to just a static JSON file instead of a real DB. So this is what's crazy. We live in a world now where as JavaScript developers, for free, you can say, all right, I'll stand up a mock API that completely simulates a real one, even down to all the CRUD read, create, read, update, delete story. So it is completely interactive. When the API is ready, all we will do is point at the real one instead. So cool. I also believe you need a demo application, and this is why. There's going to be people on your team that still want to default to the old mode of, oh, I'll just slap some code in a script tag. A demo app shows everybody how you work as a team, and when you are trying to do this, examples really help. Then people know, okay, here's how we name our files, here's the recommended directory structure, here's where we put our reducers, here's where we put our plain utility methods, here's how we structure our components. The list goes on, but examples speak volumes to people. It's like that rule of a picture is worth 1,000 words. That's exactly what a demo app does for people. You also finally need an automated deployment step. And this is our structure. We say npm start, that starts up the application, it runs our tests, it runs our linting, it does spins up a development web server, and then we see our app sitting there. Every time that we hit save, our changes are hot reloaded in the browser, so we see those immediately. Once we're happy with our dev, we go ahead and say npm run build. That generates a production build, writes to a dist folder, opens up a web server so that we can see the minified application running in our browser. Now we can see, okay, yes, it's truly ready for production. Let's type npm run deploy. It's an automated deployment out to our production environment. So it's a nice 3-step process. There's no opportunity there for human mistakes along the way because it's automated. Now, because of time, I'm not going to go through a demo of our starter kit, but the starter kit that I'm using is called React Slingshot. It's out there. It's open source. You can Google for it. This is the funny thing, though. There are so many starter kits, it's hilarious. And this is where people can start to feel overwhelmed by the number of starter kits. Starter kits were created to help people feel less fatigued, but now people just feel fatigued because there's so many starter kits to choose from. If you're a React developer, Google for Andrew Farmer. Andrew Farmer has created a database of React starter kits. There are over 100 of them. Over 100. Mine, which has over 5,000 stars, is number 6 on the list in popularity. There are 5 with a lot more. So what you realize is, wow, there's a lot of demand for this. And what I would suggest doing, don't go use one as is. Look at a number of different ones and say, I like this, I like this, I like this. Okay, team, let's take these good ideas and put them together into our own. So, in closing, I have a challenge to you. My challenge is very, very simple. I want you to send a meeting invitation to your team. I think that a single meeting could be really helpful to you. And these are 3 questions that I'd suggest that you answer. Would we benefit from having a starter kit? What are our pain points today? The very first gentleman, when I said, what are your pain points in JavaScript, said feeling overwhelmed with all of the churn in JavaScript, all of the decisions that we have to make. In the room, we know that that's the case. If that's your pain point, then a starter kit can resolve that core pain point. And you have to ask yourself, would we benefit from having a demo app? So when new people join our team, we say, here's an example of how we write code. This is how we work in JavaScript. So to wrap up, I have tried here to give you the encapsulated version of a 5-hour and 17-minute course on Pluralsight that I just launched last week. This is a topic that's really important to me, though, because what I see is a lot of developers struggling with the pain and the fatigue from all of these decisions. So I'd really encourage you to set up that meeting, make that first step, and reduce the fatigue that your team is feeling today. It really has helped us. I will tell you, when we start now, going in and starting with a starter kit, people again and again come in and go, wow, you know what? React is really quite easy to get started on. I just type npm start and I start creating components. And I go, well, yeah, it feels that way because you didn't have to pay down all the pain that our teams put in for months and months to make it luxurious. Because trust me, if you just go grab the library, it's not going to feel this way. I am HouseCore on Twitter. I'd love to hear feedback. I also have a request for you all. I have some free trials for Pluralsight, 30-day trials sitting in my bag. If you come up here and tell me one thing to change about the talk, I'll give you a free trial. But you got to be mean. Say something I could have done better, because I'm trying to improve along the way. We are tagged up against lunch here, so I'm cool with standing up here and visiting for a few. I'd love feedback. And then if some of you want to have lunch, just let me know, and I'd love to go over there and talk more JavaScript with everybody. That's what I have. Thank you for listening.